Yes, welcome to chapel. We have a neat couple chapels for you. I'd like to have Mr. Charman come up. Mr. Charman is the political science teacher this year, right? I'm sorry, computer science, biological science. You know, you do it all, don't you, Mr. Charman? And he's also doing the yearbook this year. So he's got quite a story to tell us. He's going to be here this week and next week, and he's also speaking in high school chapel. Let's give him a round of applause.
Hello. I'm just going to talk for a second while I just check the sound. I think it's all good. Political science. If I was teaching political science, people, you'd be in trouble because I wouldn't have a clue what to teach you, and you'd end up voting for all sorts of weird things. But I'm a computer science teacher up in senior. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my last 4 years. The last 4 years I've lived in New Zealand, and I have been teaching at a school in New Zealand. I'm going to just put a slide up, if they've got that slide. Just give them some time. I should try and tell you a few things about myself while I'm waiting. I am an MK as well, okay? So I grew up overseas. I grew up in the jungles of Singapore. Singapore has got lots of jungles. They're all cement, okay? The buildings are all made of cement, and Singapore is cement, so the jungles of Singapore. Okay? It's not really a wild place, but that's where I grew up. And my first experience in Singapore was after about 2 weeks of being in Singapore, I was put into a kindergarten. And the kindergarten, there was 1,000 boys, all under the age of about 7. And in this big school, I was the only white boy. And I had his colour hair, okay? I didn't have this dark hair. In fact, I had hair, so that was good. But my hair was like that, and everyone else had hair like this. And I really stuck out, okay? I was like, how do you fit in? So from an early age, I tried to fit in everywhere. And in Singapore, I went to different schools, and I went from school to school. Every few years, I'd change school because once I got older, you'd have to change. And I also moved a little bit. I went to England, and I went back to New Zealand at times. So in fact, throughout my life, if you counted up all the schools I've either worked at, studied at, done university at, I have been to 13 different schools in my life. And I'm 33 years old, so that's about every 10 years I've done, it's like every 3 years I change schools. So in 3 years I'll probably change, and I'll be somewhere else. This is the verse from my last school, and the school that I've just come from is called Elim Christian College, and it's in Auckland. And Auckland's a really big city of New Zealand. It's the big city. It's probably the best city. Us Aucklanders always say that we're the best. And I'm going to read it to you very quickly. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. And that verse was always just a motto for the school, but in the last few months, it's become more than just a motto. It's become something that I really believe in, something I really have to believe in. We have to believe in. Okay, next slide. This is where I come from. New Zealand is right down the bottom of the world. It's below Australia. It's below South Africa. It's below, okay? It's right down the bottom end. And we're not the bottom. We are the head, if you turn it around the other way. And Auckland is the little red spot where I come from. Next slide. I'm going to introduce you to 7 very special people that I know. They have impacted my life more than any other person I've ever met, besides probably my family. My family have impacted me big, but these people have also influenced me. Okay, next slide. All right, this is Anthony. Anthony is a cook, okay? Anthony loves to cook. In fact, he cooks such good cheesecake that nearly every week he's at a party where someone has to say, can you cook me a cheesecake? Okay, that's Anthony. He loves cooking. In fact, he was doing a course in being a chef. He'd already left on a Friday. Every Friday he'd go off to chef school to just do some extra chef stuff because he knew what he wanted to do. Next slide. Floyd, worship leader, okay? Someone who could play piano, play guitar, and lead worship, just like those kids who were up there today. This is no different. He is just a little bit older, but he could worship, and he actually had already written some songs, and I actually have recordings of his singing. Brilliant singer. Okay, next one. Correct. Tara is the girl who you would not mess with on a soccer field or a sports field. If you were a guy and you thought, okay, Tara, I'm going to be a little bit nice to her because she's a girl, she would make you look like a fool. All right, she was a really good sports player, and if you're a guy, you always had to watch her because she was better than you always thought she was. Okay, as a girl. Sorry, girls. Next one. Portia is the girl that was quiet, maybe didn't really see her very much at school, but all her girlfriends went to her for confidence, for a friend. She was an encourager. Her mum is exactly the same. Every time I meet her mum is the one who makes me smile. She is an unreal girl, and her mum is the same. Next one. Tom. Tom came from Taiwan, went to our school, but he also has cerebral palsy, so which meant that he would slur his words a little bit, and when he walked, he had a bit of a limp. And he got teased when he was back in Taiwan, but when he got to New Zealand, he really found, I suppose, a second home. And he was as his confidence grew in New Zealand, he became what I would say a very funny guy. Every day at school, I went looking for this guy just for a bit of a laugh because he was a funny guy. And as a teacher, you're not meant to have favourites, but at my last school, this kid was the guy that I just loved to hang out with, all right? Not as a teacher, just as a friend. He was a good guy. Next one. Natasha. This is a head girl, okay? The head girl, she's the leader. She is a genuine good girl, okay? The kind of person that everybody would have asked for advice from. Her family, her father is one of the big speakers in New Zealand when it comes to family life. He goes around speaking about family life. He's written a number of books. So she had a really massive heritage. Okay, next one. Okay, this is the colleague. He's a teacher at the school. He started at Elim last year, and he was a sports coordinator, like Mr. Coe. He organised sports activities. He had activities after school. He was a sports nut. But he also loved people, and every youth event, if you went to a youth event with Tony, there'd be 1,000 people at the event. He'd probably know half of them. They'd all come up to him and shake his hand. Oh, how you doing, Tony? And he was that kind of guy. Everyone knew him. All right, next slide. This man is my principal. Okay? And last year, he was voted in this magazine, which is New Zealand's biggest selling magazine for families and for middle-class people, New Zealander of the Year. A big title. And I'm going to tell you why he was New Zealander of the Year in a minute. And I've introduced those people, but I'm going to talk a little bit, before I go back to these people and to Murray, my principal, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. Next slide. Okay, just leave that one on there. Okay, so I'm an MK. I grew up overseas, and I'm going from school to school, and I'm learning to fit in everywhere I went. I could go to the big international school in Singapore with maybe 3,500 kids, and I would fit in. I went to the Singapore school, and I'd fit in. I'd go to the local school in England, and I'd fit in. I went to New Zealand, and I'd fit in. I went to Australia, and I'd fit in. And I started to get this ability to be like a chameleon, like a lizard that changes colours. So on a black wall or a white wall, I became white. On a black wall, I'd become black. On a blue wall, I'd become blue. Whatever school environment I was in, whatever situation I was in, I would fit in. As I got older, I started to realise that as I was fitting in, I wasn't sticking up for anything. I was just fitting in with anybody I was with. So my church, I'd fit in. But as soon as church was over, I'd go out of church, go back into my friends that I maybe not be in church, and I'd fit in there. And that was okay, maybe for a little while. In fact, it's not really okay, but in my mind, I said, oh, it's okay. But when I got to about 25, 26, I started to realise that I was so far away from God, I started to really think, man, how did I get here? What happened? And I really broke down. I found myself in all sorts of situations that I shouldn't have been in, and I'd made lots of big mistakes. And so I said to God, God, help me. I'm in trouble. And I felt that God was a mile away. I thought he was 300 miles away, 5,000 miles away. I thought he was so far away that I don't know how I was going to get back. But when I turned around, I turned my life and said, God, please come back, I realized that the whole time he was right here. Even though I was miles away, God was right here. He's always right there. Doesn't matter where you go in life, God is here. You might think you're miles away, but he's right here. So I stopped, I turned, and I repented. I said, God, I'm sorry. And I found myself on the computer looking for new jobs. I was a teacher, so I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to go back to New Zealand. My family's in New Zealand. Maybe I'm going to sort of cruise back into life a little bit, and I'm going to be real quiet, and I'm not going to really get noticed. I don't think God's going to use me at all because I've made so many mistakes. I'm a bit of a sinner, and I don't think I'm good enough, but I'm going to go back to New Zealand and teach. And that was my plan. I didn't think I'd do anything other than that. Got to New Zealand, met Mr. Burton, who was my principal, and he was my boss. Met a few other teachers, met Tony, the sports coordinator, and I started doing things at the school, just little things. But I love sport, and I love outdoor education. I love going out in the bush. So I got put onto these trips. So on April the 15th, 2008, that's last year, I went on a school trip. And on that school trip, we did all sorts of things. The first day, we got off the train, and I'll show you the next slide. Okay, so this is the train. It's a big train that goes from one end of New Zealand to the other. And to get from Auckland to the outdoor education facility, we took a train. So this is all of us going on the train. Next one. When we got to the station in the middle of the North Island, we got off here in a bus, and then we went to this campsite, a really big campsite, one of the biggest campsites in New Zealand. Every year they have probably about 15,000 kids come through. And it's a huge place. Next one. And this is us on the Sunday. We thought we'd go for a bit of a walk up this road and just get to know the place a little bit. And to be honest, they're not much different from you guys. They're a bit silly. Once in a while they have a bit of a joke. Sometimes they get in trouble. But if you look at that, they're a little bit older than you, but they are pretty much nutters. What we say in Australia and New Zealand, nutters. Someone who's a bit weird, a little bit crazy. This is us, okay? We're all a bit like that. These guys are a bit nutters, okay? Next one. Next one. Okay, we had a meeting on the Monday night after some of our activities, and that Monday we'd done some rock climbing groups. We all divided into different groups. There was 40 kids, so I took one group one day, and Tony took another group, and then there was some instructors, and they do all sorts of things. And on the Monday, I said to Tony at the end of the day, how about we change groups every day so that all of us, I get to see all the groups and you get to see all the groups, and we can go back to school and just sort of know that we've had a look at all the different groups. On the Tuesday morning, my group from the day before decided they would make me my breakfast and make my lunch, cut my lunch, my sandwiches, and they'd put it in my backpack. And they came to me in the morning and said, oh, we've already cooked your breakfast, we've already made your lunch, you're going to come with us again. Oh, so I went to Tony and he said, yeah, they did the same for me. They've cut my lunch, they've made my breakfast. Excellent, we're just going to stay here. Let's just keep it the way it was. That day I went into the river and I did a whole heap of inner tube water activities. So we were upstream, we'd be coming down, and the water was really low because it hadn't rained for a while. So I'm a big guy and my tyre was too small. So the whole time I'm on the water, I just kept banging my backside. And I thought, this is ridiculous, this isn't even fun. So I just walked it. That's how low the water was. While we were coming out of the water at lunchtime on the 15th, the other group, Tony's group, was going into a canyon. And they were walking in the canyon, they were in halfway, and then they were just deciding, okay, what should we do? We'll come back, and it started to rain. In half an hour, the water went from knee height to head height. And they were stuck on a ledge. They decided to wait on a ledge to see if the water would come down. Next slide. Next slide. This is the sort of gear that we wear. It's a wet area, okay? Next slide. Go through all those pretty quick. Yeah, next one. Next one. That's Tony. Next one. Okay, this is just before they went into the canyon. This is what they were wearing before they went in. Next one. This is what you wear when you go into the canyon, wetsuits. Okay, next one. Okay, that's what it normally looks like. The water, there's a little stick. The water was up probably another 2 meters off that. And off that ledge, they decided they would come off the ledge and see if they could get out that way by just floating down the river. There's a dam about 100 metres past the ledge, and out of the 10, or there was 12, a teacher, an instructor from camp, then there were 10 students. 6 students and Tony died. They went over the dam and they drowned. And I'm stuck there with 33 other kids and myself, and the police started coming to me and asking. At first they said, we're missing some students. So I'm like, missing? In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is okay. We can help, we're going to find them. They're just missing. About an hour later, a policeman comes to me and says, can you come and identify some bodies? And I'm starting to think, okay, this is not going to get any better. It's starting to get worse. So I went from 4 bodies, then to 6 bodies, to 7 bodies in about 3 hours on that Tuesday night. And I'm starting to think, man, but the amazing thing was that during the night, I had 33 students who I was strong for, but they were also strong for me. One of the boys at our school was a worship leader, just like, where is she? Worship. This girl here. And that night, when everything was really bad, and the police were asking me to identify bodies, and I got 33 kids, and generally the girls were hysterical and really sad, and some of the guys. It was not an easy night. But Daniel picked up a guitar and he sang. And the police were amazed that 33 Christian students were sitting there playing songs of worship to God in the middle of a tragedy. I can't teach that to anyone. I can't teach it to you guys. It is what happens sometimes when things go bad. Who do you rely on? Do you go for God or do you go for yourself? And I am so proud that 33 students went for God for help. I went to God for help. That night when I had to identify the bodies, I had no idea what to say or what to do. I just had to identify them. But I said to the policeman, I will identify the bodies for you, but can I please pray for the bodies? And I said, yes, please. So I prayed for each of these bodies, and I said, here, Lord, is your good and faithful, and they are coming home. Please, here they are, bless them. And in fact, the police told me later that I actually sang over the bodies as well. And I have no idea how that happened because I'm a terrible singer. But for some reason, I felt I needed to sing over the bodies. So I sang worship songs as well. And all the police and all the ambulance men were like, what is this guy doing? But I think I did it to glorify God. I did it for the families, and I was honoured to be able to do that for them. But I also think I did it for those who are watching. And in life, people are going to watch. In my life, I've made so many mistakes, and I found myself miles away from God. But God always has a plan for you. God always wants you to come back to Him, and He wants you to be close. I didn't think I could ever be used again. But after the tragedy, I found myself being in counselling situations, being with the police a lot, being on the television a lot. In fact, our whole school was on TV all the time. And the whole country of New Zealand is watching, going, why is this Christian school different? Why are you different to us? And we were not bitter. We were not angry. We just kept saying, we don't understand. I don't know why, but God is still in control and God is still good. And people were watching. And the whole nation of New Zealand, out of a tragedy, started to look. And instead of getting angry at God, they started to look at our school and think, and they looked at the students and they looked at this principal, and they voted my principal Man of the Year because of the way he handled a situation. I'd like to think that me, Mr. Burden, the 33 other students, and all the other students did it because we're so awesome. But it has nothing to do with me, it has nothing to do with Murray, it has nothing to do with the students of the school. It has to do with my God, your God. He is powerful, He is strong, and He is awesome, and He is always good. Doesn't matter where you are, He will always be right there. And in fact, He doesn't want to just be there, He wants to be here, on your side. I have to apologise, I think, a little bit, because I left you guys hanging last week. You know, it was not a good time to leave you guys, because I hadn't really had an opportunity to share the good things that God has been doing. And so I'm sorry for that. But in some ways, I think it's not a bad thing to leave you for a week, because you've had a week to think about things. Maybe you've had a week to think about what God's wanting you to think about, what God's challenging you about in life. I want to finish with a legacy that those 7 left, just to remind you a little bit of what I was talking about. And I've got a DVD that I want to show. And if you could just play that for me, guys.
When I say the word legacy, what comes to mind? A flash car, a mansion, millions of dollars? Well, to me, it means much, much more. My sister Natasha was one of the 6 Elim students and their teacher involved in the Mangatipopo River tragedy. As a young 16-year-old, her life has impacted hundreds of people all around the world. I've seen this through the many emails, phone calls, and tributes written on her website. People saying that they wanted to be better people because of her inspiring legacy. I knew she was cool, but I didn't realize that so many students saw her as a role model. I mean, she hogged the bathroom for ages, and she was always mothering me. But because of her legacy, I myself have decided to try harder at school and make the most of any opportunities that come my way, just like she showed me. I realize now that we all will leave a legacy of some kind. We all will be remembered for something. The question is, what will you be remembered for? Ask yourself, are you making the most of school, your time, your life, or are you just going with the flow and letting it slip away from you? May I suggest to you that you try your hardest now. Use your skills for good that will count positively in the future. Don't wait for one day when, or say, I'll do it tomorrow, because like my sister and her friends, tomorrow may never come. One of Natasha's goals was to be an Elim prefect, so she worked hard, was reliable and responsible, and lived her life with that goal in mind. She was a great role model with a real faith in Jesus. Natasha never got the honour to be an Elim prefect, but the day after she died, Mr. Byrne announced on national TV that had lost next year's head girl. So I guess she obviously left a lasting impression. What do you believe in? What do you really care about? What do you stand for? And I'm not talking about your favourite rugby team. I like the saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. In other words, if you don't know where you're going in life, you'll end up nowhere with nothing to look back on and without leaving a lasting impression on anybody. When we share with people our God-given talents, our faith and our friendship, together with our good character, we influence others for good. So forget the car, the mansion, and the millions of dollars. A good legacy is more important than you may realize. It is something that will last forever. My sister left an incredible legacy. We all will leave a legacy. The question is, what kind of legacy will you leave? Thank you.
That young man was a Year 9 student. That is Natasha's brother. His name is Ben. And when I taught to start teaching, I thought that I was going to teach everybody and they're going to learn from me. But in the last year, I have learnt more from students like you than I have from them. I thought I'd teach them, but they've actually taught me heaps more than I could have ever taught them. After a tragedy like that and after a legacy speech like that, I was totally like, God, all right, what do you want me to do? So I thought I'd go and travel the world after the school year. So at Christmas, we have our long holiday there, so I have about two months. So I left a little bit earlier than school finished, about the 13th of December, and I traveled the world for 6 weeks. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that trip, okay? Before I left, now I'm not a tattoo person. I'm not the kind of person who ever thought they'd get one. And I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and get a tattoo. But I have an impression on my life that has left a huge mark. So I put a tattoo for my memory. It's also there for people to look at and go, what's that? What's the 7? And I love sharing it. So that for me is special. But I'm not trying to tell you all to go out and get one. Next one. All right. I went to America. I thought I'd go to LA. I thought I'd see Hollywood. Awesome. Great. Never been there before. I got off the plane LA, I'm sorry for anyone who's from LA. LA's traffic was terrible. I couldn't drive halfway around the city. So I actually just went to Santa Monica, saw the beach, and that was pretty much all I saw. I was also jet lagged, so I slept a bit. And then after that, my mum said she wasn't impressed. She heard that I was going to Vegas, and she wasn't impressed. But I said, Mum, hey, I only live once. I want to go see Vegas. I want to go to Vegas. And I went to Vegas, and there's no pictures of Vegas because I had my camera stolen. And my mum gets the last laugh because she said, I told you shouldn't go to Vegas. So you should listen to your mum. All right, so I haven't got any pictures of Vegas. But the next slide. After Vegas, actually this was in Santa Monica. I caught up with the law. Okay, I just saw this guy on the street and I just went up and said hello. He is huge, all right? I'm not small, but he is massive, okay? He is huge. So that was my only 2 photos of America. Anyway, next one. Sorry, people. After America, I went to Canada. I have cousins who are in Canada. My uncle married a Canadian lady, and a few years ago he drowned. He was a university lecturer. He taught political science. He wasn't a Christian, he was a socialist, talked about communism, and he was a lecturer, and he actually went to Cuba and taught at the lecture there a few times every year. And while he was in Cuba, he had a heart attack while he was diving, and he died. And my auntie was with him in the water, and she couldn't hold him up. So I'd never met my cousins, and I'd never been to Canada, so I wanted to go and make an impact on them. The word I'm starting to use is this legacy. I wanted to start making impacts. So I went over to my cousins, and I had an awesome time. And I remember sitting in her lounge room, just my auntie and I, and we both were crying. I got to share about my tragedy, and she got to share about her tragedy. And at the end of it, I don't know where her faith is, but it was just an awesome time of sharing, and for me to share that I still trust God. Her grandson, my first cousin, or whatever, my first cousin's son, heard about what I was doing coming here. And so after that trip to Canada, a few weeks ago, I went to India, and he came with me, non-Christian, 18-year-old kid, and we went and helped in an orphanage for 3 weeks. So that was the first thing that started to happen. Things started to happen. Just little testimonies, little opportunities came in. So that was the first one, Canada. So I'm going to go through these. Went to the Niagara Falls. It was in the middle of winter. It was just unreal. So we went through that. While I was there, snowing on Christmas Day, or just before Christmas, these are the chores that I had to do every morning. My uncle asked me to, or uncle-in-law asked me to do the snow. Went around Toronto, keep going. Then I went to England. My best friend is in England, and my cousins are in England. My mum is Welsh, so I went to Wales. So just keep going. This is the Seven Sisters. It's just around the corner from Dover, and had a really good time there. That's my best mate. I went to visit him, keep going. I also went to see where Winnie the Pooh, this is where Winnie the Pooh was made, the book was written. Okay. I went to Stonehenge, Wales, lots of castles. Keep going. Castle, just lots of castles. I also got to see Evan Roberts' tombstone. Now, for some of you who may not know who he is, he was a Welsh revivalist. He started a revival in Wales, and I was just really wanted to go there. So I went to Wales and saw this tombstone, and it just challenged me about what kind of legacy am I leaving? What kind of impact? Am I reviving people for the Lord, or am I just doing nothing? Next one. England, got to see all those London, England stuff. Big Ben, keep going, the Eye. All right, all these cool things. I also went to Belgium. Never been to Belgium, and I wanted to go, so I wanted to have a look. So I went to all sorts of places in Belgium. Amazing place. It was winter as well, so just awesome to see how it was. All right, just little things you have to take photos of. All right, there was a big war museum. And in some ways, that was an excellent thing to go and see, just to see how World War II, just the massive size of World War II. Like this place just had tombstones of machinery. So tanks, planes, there was hundreds and hundreds of these type of things. And it just made me realize how big war is. How big and how much of an impact it can have on people. Next one. Okay. After Belgium, I flew to Africa. And I went to Lesotho. I have friends who are missionaries with Pioneers in Lesotho. Lesotho is a small country surrounded by Africa, or South Africa. And Lesotho has the highest population of AIDS in the world. In the statistics, they would tell you, the government would tell you it's about 25%. But the reality is it's about 50%, above 40%. So every second person has AIDS, nearly. And I got there after a tragedy in Elim with 7 lives that the whole country stopped and looked at and was like, wow. And then I get to Lesotho, and I would say 7 people die every few hours. And I'm suddenly left with this challenge of 7 that are loved and lost and remembered to 7. And the way that I sort of looked at the lives in Lesotho was that they were unknown, unloved, and usually they were suffering as well. And it was a real challenge to me. It was like, God, how can you do that there and then this here? They seem to be unfair. And it was a real challenge. I started asking God, why does this happen? But the missionaries in Lesotho kept saying to me, don't ask why. Ask, what can you do? What can you do? That was the question that started to come out. And in fact, they asked me to speak at their Pioneers devotion. And I'm like, what am I going to say? You guys have got so much testimonies of what God's doing. You know, I want you to tell about New Zealand and what happened to the tragedy. So I did. And at the end of that, the guy who runs Pioneers came to me and said, from the video that you showed us of all those flowers and all those things that went to all those people, or those 7 students, we want to make it, for every person who dies that we know, we're going to take flowers. At least 1 flower and put it on their grave. Because in Lesotho, a grave is usually not 1. It's usually a mass grave on a Saturday because they can't do it like individually. So they wanted to start making a change. They wanted to start putting flowers on each person's tomb. So every person who died would get at least 1 flower for memory. And I thought, wow, God he's using me to get to these people. And I thought, wow, okay, God has a purpose. Next thing. In Lesotho, in the middle of the nowhere, okay, I am kilometers inland. And for those who don't understand what that is marijuana. Okay, I am in the middle of Lesotho, in the middle of nowhere, and I come across marijuana, okay? And the horse that was next to this ate it. And I'm thinking, random, right? Just really weird, okay? And that's my thumb there. So it's a huge marijuana plant. All right, next one. I don't know why I'm telling you that. But this is the sort of stuff that I saw when I was in Lesotho. Next one. This is this kid's toy. All right, it's a little car that he makes. He doesn't have anything else, so they just make things out of cans and wire. Awesome. It's got like its own suspension system. It's just awesome. Okay, this little kid is about 6 months old, and she was found in a toilet, a drop loo. Okay, has AIDS, but Pioneers have got a lot of things that they run, and this kid is now really, really healthy. Looks skinny and small, but she is a lot healthier than she was. Okay, next one. This girl, most cute little kid. Her father and her mother have died of AIDS, and she has AIDS. Okay, it's just a life that I could not imagine until I got there. Next one. Next one. Next one. I got to build like a water trap behind this house because this lady, she's about 70 years old, and in Africa that's old because you really don't live that long over there. But she has 7 kids that she looks after because all their parents have died. So we built a big water hole so that the water would come off the roof, get there, and she could use it for her plants, her crops that she was trying to grow. All right, next one. I then went to Africa, and I got to see God's creation. It was awesome, okay? It was unreal in Africa to go around places like Johannesburg, which is a national park, a safari park, and just got to see all sorts of amazing things. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. It was beautiful, all right? It's just awesome to see what God can do, all right? He is creative. He loves it, all right? After South Africa, one of the kids who died was named Tom, and he was really close to me. So his parents were not Christians. He came to New Zealand, became a Christian. He started sharing his testimony. He actually ended up going to a lot of places to share his testimony. And then the last thing he did was he went to Taiwan and shared his testimony in a church in Taiwan. His parents came, and they became Christians. Then he died, and I just wanted to go to Taiwan at the end of my trip and be able to say hello to his parents and just encourage them. And that's really hard for them. Chinese, he was the oldest son. Chinese culture, they're now Christians. Their whole family is wondering why they did that, and it's a curse to their family. Tom's dying was part of that curse. They're all, it's a really hard time for them. At this point in my trip, okay, so get through. So I met some people, Confucius, next one. That's pig's ear, that's duck head, that's pig foot. That's a bit weird, but that's the motorbikes. Chinese New Year's coming up. It's around about the 20th of January this year. That's Tom's mum and dad and his uncle and auntie. Next one, that's his tombstone. And then, stop it there, okay? I decided I'd have a holiday in Thailand. At January the 20th, I thought, cool. I've had 6 weeks on the road, and I mean it was 6 weeks flat out. Like I didn't really stop. And I just wanted to come to Thailand, and I have some really good friends. In fact, the guy that I stayed with, or his family that I stayed with, are missionaries here, and they've been here for a long time, about 10 years. And I knew him when I was about 12 years old, 13 years old. He was like a mentor. He was at a Bible college that my parents taught at, and he came alongside me, and he said, let's catch up every morning, let's go for a run and have some breakfast. The run didn't help me, but it's all right. But we would have breakfast every second day, and we'd just pray, and he was like an awesome mentor to me. It was absolutely brilliant. And I didn't really catch up with him for a few years. Then the tragedy happened, and he heard about it, and he was in New Zealand, so we caught up after 10 years, never seeing each other. Or actually longer than that, 15 years. And then in January, he said, at the end of your trip, come to Thailand, we'll just have a holiday, we can have a really good relax. I thought, awesome. Next slide. So I got off the plane. I bring my bags to the airport, because you do, and I gave it to them. They put it in their car. We went to church first thing Sunday morning. At the end of the church, my bags are still in the car, and they said to me, let's go to Tiger Kingdom, because we don't normally go there, but let's go there, and you can have a bit of a look at these tigers, and it's all good. So Ruth, Stu, Eliana, Carissa, and Caleb all went to Tiger Kingdom. And Mr. Corlett, Stu, went into the little cage with the little tigers just to be with the kids and take some, he's a photographer, he likes to take photos. And Ruth and I went into the big cage. And it was just, hey, this is, we think it's safe, it's all good. So we get inside there. There's a couple already in there with the tiger there, cuddling it and patting it, and it's all good. Ruth, I said, guys, I'm a gentleman, so I said, Ruth, you go first. So, and I've got this camera, and it's Stu's really awesome $3,000 camera. So I'm there taking, just shooting everything. Next minute, stuff starts to happen. Is how the tiger started to look a little bit agitated. And in a few minutes of being in there, this tiger jumps on her and bit her leg. And I'm in there, and she grabs hold of me. All right? So the tiger's on her, she's on me, and I'm like, okay, what do I do now? So the trainers in the place seemed to do a bolter. They ran. So I'm there, they're not anywhere around. For a few seconds, it's just me, her, and a tiger. So I'm there holding the stupid tiger's mouth. All right? And Ruth's in pain. It's not small, this bite, okay? It's a big bite. She ended up with 54 stitches on her leg. I think it was 54, 53. And it was a long haul of a trip for her because she had to be in hospital. She had to go back when it got infected. Any bite from an animal is always going to get infected generally, so she was back in hospital. And I'm there at the end of that, and I'm like, I had to, first of all, try and wrestle the silly tiger. Now, the newspapers in New Zealand thought it was a great story, so they wrote on it, and they said it was minutes, but it wasn't minutes. I was only there for about 4 seconds, to just sort of try and, I don't know what I was doing. I really have no idea. If the tiger had wanted to, I think it could have just gone sick, but I don't know what I did. But for some reason, the guys came back with sticks, hit it, knocked it off, and then they bolted again. Okay, as soon as the tiger was running, they ran. So I'm there with Ruth. I put her over my shoulder, and I carry her out of this big enclosure. And Stu takes over because he's a pharmacist, medical background. He takes over. It helps. I take the kids as far away from where she was, just so they didn't have to see so much of what was going on. And we just prayed. She went to hospital, and she's back. She's all good now. In fact, that tiger bite. At first, I was like, why am I here? It's like, God, this is a crazy year. I am not happy. And I'm like, God, if you're going to make something happen, why twice, okay? And at the end of it, I kept saying to Stu, why am I here? Am I a curse to society? Like all my friends back in New Zealand say, if you ever go on holiday, we're not coming, okay? We don't want to go anywhere near where you go. But Stu said to me, in life, again, same as Lesotho, same as the tragedy, I can't ask why. It's natural for me to ask why, but at the end of the day, I had to stop sort of asking that question and say, God, what do you want me to do? And I thought about Lesotho, and I thought about all these things that I could even stay in New Zealand and teach. It was great. But after a few months of being back in New Zealand, Stu rang me and said, Grace International School needs a teacher. Are you interested? And his words then were, you can make a change here. Thailand needs Jesus. Asia needs Jesus. Come and help. And it was just instant. Yeah, I'm doing that. So 3 months ago, I started to get all my stuff together. I was packing, planning, getting funds together, and all my funds, I would say 50% of the people who support me are parents or teachers from that school that you saw before. God has a weird way of working into my life and purposes and plans. It's an honor to be feeling that I'm working for these parents, doing something. Their family legacy, their kids' lives are moving not only to just New Zealand, but it's now here. I just shared your testimony. I shared it in England. I shared it in Africa. God's testimony. It's not mine. It's God's glory. In the beginning of this today, we sang a song. Just before you all came in, just before the bell came, there's just a few of us in here singing. And one of the songs is Dance for Jesus. I'm going to put a DVD on. It's not a Christian DVD, but the idea of it, I just have to believe is Jesus. Just watch this for a sec. Hey, can you turn it off? People, I can tell you about 7 lives and not start to cry. But when I show that DVD, I cry. The reason is because we live in a world that doesn't know Jesus. Stop. Oh, sorry. I can't help but cry because we have a life to share. We have a Jesus to share. And in life, you get to dance. And when you start your dance, you're alone and no one is watching. And then you start people to watch and they think you're absolutely mad. Look at this. I'm an idiot. But Jesus wants you to dance. If you dance, people start to join in. When I see that DVD, I see a whole world that wants to dance with you. You are so blessed because you know Jesus. You are so blessed you have the opportunity to know Jesus. In your life, tell the world about Jesus. I just can't tell you enough about that. I spent half my life away from him, and I do not want to go back there. The 7 lives that I have seen in New Zealand made such an impact that people wanted to dance like they danced. Your life, make sure you dance for Jesus. I'm going to pray for you. I want you to put your hand to the person next to you. Just lay your hand on their shoulder or put your arm around them. And you're going to just agree with my prayer, okay? You're going to pray for the person next to you. And then I'm going to leave you to go on and dance for Jesus. Dear Lord, I just love you. In this room, we love you. And Jesus, we want to share you with everyone we can. Lord, I just pray that when we live, we will be adventurous, we'll be risk takers, and we'll dance. We might look stupid, we might look crazy, but Lord, use what we do every day. Some lives seem to be full of things happening. My last year has been crazy, Lord, but I want you to be glorified in it. And for some of these guys in here, it's going to be maybe quiet. But one day they're going to have a time, a season, where it just seems like it's full on. And in that time, may they trust you, may they believe in you, and may they dance for Jesus Christ. In Jesus' name, Amen.